the nature of choice. The topic of, does the addict really have a choice, right? As we dip into the bag of kratom, as we dip into our stash, as the alcoholic walks to the liquor store, is there a choice in the matter? This is kind of a philosophical topic of, do humans have free will? Can you believe some people don't think we have free will at all? That everything is deterministic, determined by forces outside of us that we don't control. Some people don't think we're driving the bus at all. Us humans, us just lowly humans, just here. Everything has kind of been predetermined. I was talking about this with my father over Thanksgiving. And my father is very old school, right? You know the type. Everything is a choice. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Everything is a choice you make in the moment. If you come up to a fork in the road, you can choose to go right or you can choose to go left. If you're presented with a choice of right or wrong, it's in your power to choose to do the right thing and better yourself. This is kind of his philosophy. It's a very, common philosophy amongst, like old school Americans, small town Americans, like kind of a conservative philosophy, right? And there's other people who think, addiction is not really a choice at all, right? It's not a choice. And I think this stems from, there are some people who probably have this not a choice thing because it's like they just have a framework of thinking that, they have no power, no control, and kind of believing that there's no choice in the matter, kind of having this philosophy that there's no choice, just kind of allows you to sink into this nihilistic kind of lifestyle where you can't affect any change. And people kind of take on this philosophy to avoid the hard work and avoid the responsibility of actually doing something with their life, right? Two sides of the same coin. Now, I don't think it's as black and white as either or, right? I gave my father the example of, let's say, a Vietnam veteran. He came back from the war. He's suffering with PTSD. Our government is not helping them, right? Our government sends millions, billions overseas to these other countries. We can't help our own veterans here. So a veteran gets back to the States and he's struggling with PTSD. He has injuries. He's in pain, right? So what does he seek out? A lot of these guys, they seek out drugs to numb the psychological pain, drugs to numb the physical pain because nobody's helping them. It's almost as if you could say, does he have any choice when he went off to war, came back, and nobody's helping him? Nobody's helping him process his trauma. Nobody's helping him get through life, become functional. The programs we got are not very helpful. You see a lot of these veterans on the streets, and you think to yourself, well, nobody chooses that life. When you see somebody on the street, now certainly there's a case to be made for, some of the homeless do choose that life. I'm not saying that at all. But for a lot of these people you see on the street, it's not like they were in third grade and the teacher asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this is the life they wanted to live. You look at the way some people live, especially these really, polarizing examples, like being homeless, like being on the street. Nobody who in their right mind would choose that. Who in their right mind would become addicted? Who in their right mind would be on the street? But such is the case that we get put into predicaments, man. We get financial troubles, financial strain. Let's say we're dealing with a health problem, perhaps caused by the system, perhaps caused by the medical system. right? We get put into this situation where uh, sometimes it gets hard to even be functional in this world. Now, people like my father, very hard workers, he's just somebody who can plow through, baby. He could just he plowed through, you know. He's both my mom and my dad are two people in my family that don't have any real problems. No addictions. They said no to the alcohol because they kind of saw what it did, right? They kind of made all those right choices growing up. They saw what it did. They made the choice not to drink and get hooked on drugs. That was a choice they made. He made a choice to work hard and become the best at his craft. So he kind of sees things from a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, anything's possible type scenario. And, that's great. I could see why you'd have that philosophy. And when I gave him this example of the veteran who comes back with all these problems, nobody's helping him. So he gets hooked on drugs to find a solution to his psychological problems, to his physical problems and pain. I could see his logic almost cracked, like it almost sunk in, that sometimes you're presented with a case that it's almost as if you don't have a choice, right? And it almost sunk into him, but he still kind of came out of the talk with this idea that, well, everybody has a choice, everybody has a choice between taking drugs or not taking drugs. Everybody has a choice. And I think it can be both. I think you could kind of straddle both of these philosophies. I remember in my alcoholism, when I was drinking, when I was running amok and deep into like one of my 30-day benders, that's how I drank. I'd go on these benders, kind of get sober for a while, and then go on another bender. There were some days I remember looking back, walking down to the liquor store, walking down to get my booze for the day, that it was like I wasn't even driving the bus, right? Have you ever had that feeling? And it's only when you reflect back on how you used to be in your addiction that everybody could look at times, can look at moments where you really weren't driving the bus. It was something totally different. It was a spirit, you could call it. It was a demon, you could call it. It was something else that was kind of outside of you that almost gave you no choice in the matter at all. It's like if you held a gun to somebody's head and you said, do 30 push-ups, or somebody's holding a gun to your head and they say, do 30 push-ups, do you really have a choice in that moment? If you think this person is actually going to pull the trigger, do you have a choice to say no? Now, perhaps the hardcore of us would say, well, yes, you can say no, right? Of course you can say no. It's as easy as saying it, right? It's just as easy as making the choice in the moment to say no. But really, do you have a choice at all? When somebody's threatening your life, telling you to do something, they got a gun to your head, they're telling you to do 30 push-ups, are you really being given a choice at all? Of course you could say no. But what do? We try to avoid consequences, right? And that's kind of the way I see a lot of addiction. Is it's like somebody has a gun to your head. It's like the addiction has a gun to your head and is kind of telling you what to do, So yeah, you could take the example of the guy pulls out a gun, puts it to somebody's head, and you could say, well, yeah, that person still has a choice, but do they really? Do they really have a choice not to do those push-ups? I would say not really, Like objectively, like, yeah, you could kind of process the logic and say, well, of course they could say no if they wanted to. But it's almost like you're being given almost no choice at all in the matter. And I think that's where a lot of people find themselves in, especially with these addictions. It's like there's almost no choice. Those days where I was walking down to the liquor store, shaking, my hands shaking, walking down to the liquor store, it was almost as if I had no choice at all. The withdrawals weren't giving me any choice. This and that. I wanted to avoid feeling bad. And people get into these situations. It's like, once again, nobody's in the third grade telling their teacher that they want to be an addict on the street, that they want to be homeless on the street. Nobody really makes that choice. It's just kind of we start using drugs and we start using these substances in kind of almost a playful way, not really knowing what we're getting ourselves into. And then next thing we know, a year goes by, 5 years goes by, and the gun is kind of to your head, isn't it? And it was almost like, yeah, you had no choice at all. But I will say that even in those moments of my alcoholism, even for the addict, the addict who is on the street, the addict who is self-medicating every day in a very dangerous way, you will occasionally get the light of the glory shining through. Because the problem with the addict is he is so consumed with getting his fix and perpetuating his addiction that he's really not conscious of what is right and what is wrong. In those moments, I really think the addict doesn't have a choice. But occasionally, the light is allowed to shine through. When I was an alcoholic, the light was allowed to shine through. And for a very brief second, I knew what was right and what was wrong. I knew the right decision was to quit. And it's like you get thrown a lifeline, even in the most dire of circumstances. You get thrown this lifeline. And I do think for even the most hardcore addicts, occasionally they'll get a lifeline that floats by. And in that moment, yes, they do have a choice to either take the lifeline or continue using, right? So even though these lifeline moments are rare for the addict, rare for the alcoholic, they do come by, baby. They do come by. And in that moment, if you choose to continue the behavior, well, then I think it is your choice, because for that brief second, you've been made aware of what was right and what was wrong. Your soul is allowed to peek through just for a brief second. You get jolted with a momentary sense of clarity about what you're actually doing. And in those moments, if you continue to use, if you continue the behavior, well, then I believe in that moment, you've made the choice to do so. So it's not exactly this or that. I think sometimes you really have no choice. Sometimes the addict doesn't have a choice because he's so unconscious. But other times, I think we get thrown lifelines every now and then. We briefly become aware of what is right and what is wrong. And in those moments, I do believe we have a choice to grab the lifeline, or we have the choice to continue using and just continue the spiral. So yeah, the choice isn't always there, but once again, occasionally you will see the lifeline floating by, and some people just look at the lifeline and they make the wrong choice, right? They become made aware of what is right and wrong, but they make a choice to zig left when they should have zagged right? So you guys let me know what you think in the comments. Does the addict have a choice? Are there moments in time where we become aware of what is right and what is wrong? Do we have no choice at all? Is everything predetermined? Your thoughts, your philosophies down in the comments below. As always, Fallon, GoNootropics.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And I will see you very soon. Peace.